Edith Sitwell said of herself, "I'm not eccentric, it's just that I am more alive than most people." And she described herself as an unpopular electric eel set in a pond of goldfish. In this presentation, we're going to be looking at Sitwell's poem, Heart and Mind, so an interesting poem by an interesting poet. Born in 1887, Sitwell endured an unhappy childhood in Sheffield with affluent but neglectful parents. She managed to escape to London with the help of her governess, and from 1914 the two women lived in a small flat in London, where Sitwell would preside over gatherings of artists and writers. After publishing her first book of poems and editing an important poetry magazine, Wheels, she was seen in the 1920s as an important and influential poet. Her work was often ambitious and experimental, employing allegory and symbolism, and she cultivated a personal image that was often described as eccentric. There are two concepts that we can look at before we take a bit of a closer look at the poem. The first is that of a dichotomy. A dichotomy is a partition of a whole or a set into two parts or subsets that are both jointly exhaustive, which means that everything must belong to either one part or the other, and mutually exclusive, which means nothing can belong simultaneously to both parts. Another key idea in the poem is that of binary opposition. Binary opposition is a key concept in structuralism, which is the theory of sociology, anthropology, and linguistics, and this states that all elements of human culture can only be understood in relation to one another, and how they function within a larger system of the overall environment. You might encounter binary oppositions in cultural studies when exploring relationships between different groups of people, for instance upper class and lower class, or disabled and non-disabled. On the surface, these seem like mere identifying labels, but what makes them binary opposites is the notion that they cannot coexist. As we look at the poem, try and think about how these concepts of dichotomy and binary opposition might be relevant to Sitwell's work. Said the lion to the lioness, "When you are amber dust, no more a raging fire like the heat of the sun, no liking but all lust." Let's take a closer look at these first few lines. Now, the first thing to note is that the sentence is not how we might usually construct it. The word order is inverted. And the suggestion might be that what is being said is more important than who is saying it. This construction comes across as somewhat archaic, which suggests that the contents of the poem are something akin to a fable. We do have these figures of the lion and the lioness. The poem starts unusually with a conversation between the two. Lions and lionesses have quite rich symbolic meaning. Their attributes include wisdom, power, royalty, courage, dignity, justice, ferocity, dominion, and authority. So an interesting starting point for the poem to have a conversation between these two symbolic figures. The reference to amber dust is a metaphor which is a euphemistic reference to the death and decay of the lioness's physical body. The use of the term amber brings to mind the colour of the lioness's pelt and suggests that even as dust, her remains will still be precious. The combination of metaphor and simile in the phrase "a raging fire like the heat of the sun" might be a reference to the burning passion of the lion's life, and this is hyperbolized by the simile, comparing this passion to the heat of the sun. This phrase in parenthesis seems to support this assertion, and it makes it clear that the lioness's nature is physical and passionate as opposed to sentimental and rational. "Remember still the flowering of the amber blood and bone, the rippling of bright muscles like a sea. Remember the rose prickles of bright pulse." Well, we've got a repetition here of the word remember, and this is an imperative. It seems like the lion is imploring his mate to hold on to the memory of her physical form. The use of the verb flowering is interested here in that it conveys a sense of vitality and growth. Here we've got an interesting adjective-noun combination, amber, blood and bone, repetition of that term amber. And this links back to that previous description of the lioness, but instead of dust, here we have the living flesh and of the lioness. The rippling of these bright muscles creates a sense of movement and power. The word bright has positive connotations, but might even also suggest an overpowering of the senses. And the lioness's muscles, like a sea, this similarly augments that sense of movement by bringing to mind perhaps ripples or waves on water and comparing that to the movement of the lioness. Finally, I have with this description of rose prickles of bright paws, which is interesting imagery. There's a contrast being created between the pleasing form of the rose and the discomfort of its defences, its thorns. And this is a metaphor for the lioness's paw, which is both padded and clawed. Though we shall make no more, till the fire of that sun, the heart and the moon, cold bone are one. The meaning of the phrase make no more, the verb to make has a number of meanings, but the ones which would seem to match here concerned with a partner or engagement in sexual intercourse. So the lion is talking about a time in the future when he and his mate will no longer be together. We've got a metaphor here, the fire of the sun, the heart, again similar to what we've come across previously, and this refers to the warm-blooded, living passion of the lioness. This is contrasted with the metaphor of moon cold bone, and this metaphor represents the lifeless body of the lioness. So what's being implied here is that the lion and the lioness, following her death, will be apart until they are joined together in death when the lion also dies. Set the skeleton lying upon the sands of time, the great gold planet that is the morning heat of the sun is greater than all gold, more powerful than the tawny body of a lion that fire consumes, like all that grows or leaps, so is the heart. Quite a lot going on here in this section of the poem. We've got the symbol of the skeleton, that's a common symbol of death. The fact that this skeleton is lying on the sands of time, this is a figurative expression which relates to the passage of time, to the sand sifting through an hourglass, running through an hourglass. And the implication here is that time is running out for all living things for whom the skeleton, the symbol of death, awaits. This great gold planet, alliteration here is drawing our attention to this feature and suggesting that the sun is the source of life. But interestingly, this idea of a morning heat, the heat of the sun is normally considered life-giving, but here it's laid and comes with a sense of grief for all the life which will inevitably pass away. The comparatives, greater than all gold and more powerful, seem to equate the power of the sun with passion or life itself, which will all eventually be consumed and end over time. The description of the tawny body this time of the lion, we have a change in the description of the lion's body compared to that of the more valuable amber that was used to describe the body of the lioness. The lion's body now takes on a more leathery tone, corporeal, bodily, in comparison with the heavenly body of the sun, which, as we've mentioned, is a metaphor for spirit, passion, perhaps life itself. And the point being made here is that passion, or the essence of life, is immensely powerful, yet ultimately self-consuming, that everything that grows or leaps is eventually consumed by the process of living life and ending in death. more powerful than all dust. Once I was Hercules or Samson, strong as the pillars of the seas, but the flames of the heart consumed me, and the mind is but a foolish wind. Again, we have the comparison here, creating a distinction between the corporeal, bodily, physical existence of a particular entity whose body will eventually decay and turn to dust, and the heart, which might represent the passionate nature of life itself. So life continues in general, even though a particular individual ceases to live, dies. These references to Hercules and Samson are biblical and classical allusions, and such references might create this idea of a shared existence in life, with the sense that all life, even that of mighty heroes, will eventually end in death. The simile here, strong as the pillars of the seas, refers to an ancient belief that the sea was supported by pillars. The entire sea was held up by pillars, and this is here to reflect the great strength of those figures that I've just mentioned, Hercules and Samson. The ending of this section, then, we have two contrasting metaphors, the flames of the heart and the mind as a foolish wind. And these metaphors seem to suggest that the passion for life is paradoxically a destructive force, that life sort of burns itself out, and against this zest for life, reason, the foolish wind of the mind, can offer but little defense. Said the sun to the moon, when you are but a lonely white crone, and I a dead king in my golden armour somewhere in a dark wood, remember only this of our hopeless love, that never till time is done will the fire of the heart and the fire of the mind be one. Here we have some other allegorical figures, the sun and the moon. These are rich symbols which might represent binary oppositions such as masculine and feminine, reason, passion, life and death. The impression of the moon as a lonely white crone, the combination of noun and adjective here, creates an image of the moon as a solitary, aged woman abandoned by her partner, the sun. The sun himself is depicted as using this very evocative image of a lifeless sun, a slain king, lost in the woods, the darkness of space. We have a repetition of this imperative to remember, and this seems to be in order for the loved one to be warned of the ephemeral, fleeting nature of any single couple's love, and also the fleeting nature of life itself. There also seems to be some kind of consolation that there will be at some point in the future some form of reunion. However, the use of the adjective hopeless here seems to suggest that all love is forlorn, in the sense that it is finite in nature. It must eventually end with the death of the lovers, even if those are the sun and the moon. What does the end of the poem mean then? Remember only this of our hopeless love, that never till time is done will the fire of the heart and the fire of the mind be one. Well, it seems to conclude that binary opposites, the lion and the lioness, the sun and the moon, the masculine and the feminine, can only be bound by life, love, passion, or lust. This will only last for a finite amount of time, and the eternal unity can only be reached at the end of time, when all distinctions cease to exist, because everything ceases to exist and all things are passed into oblivion. I hope that you found this presentation useful. I will be adding further presentations on this selection of poems to my channel. Thank you very much for listening.